Okay, this video is going to be about getting to sleep when you're dealing with a lot of anxiety after a bad trip. And this is something that I know that I struggled with, and I know a lot of y'all struggle with too. So I'm going to be talking about a bunch of techniques, well, not a bunch, but a good number of techniques that I developed and that worked for me when I was really in the thick of my healing process, and that I really relied on because sleep was one of the most difficult things for me to kind of get to because of the level of anxiety I was dealing with. And a lot of my anxiety started at night, which I think is pretty common. So I'll just start going through these tips and the basic ideas. There's 3 basic categories that these things fall into. The first is to make sure that you're really actually ready to go to bed, that you're actually sleepy. Because if you're not actually sleepy, you're just going to go lay in bed and wait to fall asleep, and a lot can happen in that state. The second category is to preemptively neutralize anxious thoughts, give them a way to come out before bed, to try to prevent the chance of them coming out while you're trying to fall asleep. And the third thing is to prevent anxiety loops from forming and really blossoming. So those are the 3 categories. Now I'll tell you what the tips are. So yeah, the first thing, which I kind of already mentioned, is make sure you're actually really sleepy before you lay down into bed. You may need to exercise. You may need to read a boring book or something, but make sure you're actually feeling like, oh, I'm tired, I want to go to sleep. Not just I need to go to sleep. I want to go to sleep. Because if you're just like, oh, it's 11 o'clock, it's my bedtime, you may need to throw those rules out for a second, because if you're just going to sleep because it's time to go to sleep and you're not actually really truly in a place where you could easily fall asleep, you could get yourself into a pickle, because you'll be laying there and your brain's going to start going somewhere. And if you're really having a hard time with anxiety right now, it's probably going to go to anxious thoughts. So, wake up earlier, don't drink your coffee, exercise, do a lot during the day, and really try to get yourself tired out. If it's the weekend and all day you've just been sitting on your computer or something like that, that's probably not going to be the most beneficial thing for this right now, because you're not going to really be that tired. You're not going to have done anything during the day. Okay, so let's see. I'm trying to do my categories. Okay, so another thing is to give yourself a transition period between waking and doing things and existing and sleep. If you're running here and running there and doing all this stuff, cleaning or doing the dishes or talking or watching TV or something, and then all of a sudden you just go to sleep, there's no transition period there. And so what you can run into is being kind of really stimulated, and then you try to lay down and your brain has to get reoriented to the fact that you're no longer in a stimulated state, and that can also just foster a lot of anxiety and not necessarily foster the anxiety itself, but give it an opportunity to come out, because now you're laying in bed, you're doing nothing, and you have all this time to think. So don't do that. You want to give yourself a good transition period. I would say at least an hour. And I know that sounds like a lot, but you're in a delicate time right now. You need to take more time for yourself, and you need to take more precaution about how you're spending your time, and just tone things down a little bit. It's not going to kill you to tone things down. You might even find that you like it, but I would definitely give yourself time away from technology and phones, Netflix, just let it go. It'll be there tomorrow, and give yourself some time. Maybe go on a walk. I like to go on a walk, a good long, like 45-minute walk around where I live, before going to sleep. And I think it's just nice to get out in nature, or I don't know what else you could do. You could just sit and listen to music or something. Just anything that is just like really low stimulation, and it's gonna start winding you down. Maybe you read a book or some, anything that's gonna kind of form a bridge between sleep and wake, or wake and sleep. Okay. Another thing, and I mentioned this in another video, but chamomile tea is helpful. It's just a really mild herbal, non-caffeinated tea that kind of is good for just relaxing you ever so slightly. It's not something you're going to notice a huge effect from, but you'll it's like you'll notice what doesn't happen more than what does happen. Like, you'll notice, hey, my anxiety wasn't, that bad last night, versus, wow, I really felt chill from that chamomile. But, I guess if you drink enough of it, I typically drink like 2 tea bags because it's just so mild. Okay. Okay, another part of the transition that I would recommend is transition your lighting. If you think about people living out in the middle of nowhere, or in the primitive days when we didn't have electric lighting, the sun went down and it got dark, and then they went to bed because there was no light to do anything with. I mean, they had candles, but how effective? Have you ever tried to do anything by candlelight? Like, you might as well go to bed at that point. So do a similar kind of thing for yourself. I know that, you don't have to necessarily follow the rhythm of the day. Like, in winter, it gets dark at 6 o'clock. You're not going to go to bed at 6 o'clock, but, I mean, you could. But, like, try to create the effect of the sun setting. Ever so often in the evening, just turn your light level down a little bit. I would really recommend getting away from bright light, everything on, all the ceiling lights, and then turn it off and go to bed. Like, maybe an hour or two before bed, you turn off some of the ceiling lights and then turn on a lamp or two, and then an hour before you bed, you turn off all the ceiling lights and just have a lamp on. And then I'm really sensitive to lighting, so I have some lights on a dimmer and things like that, where I just gradually turn it down. And so it's basically creating the effect that your body, your primitive self, knows to respond to in order to start going to bed. Think about how many thousands of years this is what signaled us to go to bed, and it actually starts the process of producing the chemical in your brain that makes you sleepy and makes you ready to go to sleep. That part of your brain is sensitive to light and dark, so you want to kind of help it along. Okay. I mentioned this a little bit, but stay away from caffeine. If you're having trouble going to sleep, I know caffeine is, a lot of people live and die by it, but you're kind of messing with your natural rhythm. I know a lot of people who I have known people who, they wake up and they have to drink coffee, and then it gets to be nighttime and they have to, smoke pot or something to calm down enough to go to sleep. And then they just do it every day, and it's like, well, maybe if you just took away those 2 substances, you would, yes, be sleepy in the mornings for a couple days, but then you would also go to bed earlier because you're tired, theoretically, and then you'd wake up a little bit more rested, and then your body would be able to get in a natural rhythm again. Maybe try that. It's not going to kill you to not drink coffee, and it'll probably really help your situation, because it just, I don't drink a lot of coffee. I don't drink a lot of substance. I don't consume a lot of substances that alter my mental state a lot. I try to stay away from that. But I noticed that since I have a low tolerance to coffee, if I even drink like a little, I get the little bitty latte when I really not had any sleep. They always ask me at the coffee shop, they're like, are you sure this is the one you want? And I'm like, yes, the 8-ounce one. Because if I drink any more, I'll be shaking. And if you think about that kind of wavelength, the jittery wavelength, might be contributing to your anxiety a little bit. So just try and stay away from it. See how it goes. Okay, let's see. Okay. One thing that I think is really important, and like I said, is preempting the anxious thoughts. If you go through your day and you have all these things bottled up inside of you, all these feelings, all these thoughts, all these concerns, and you don't give them a way to get out before you actually go to sleep, as soon as your head hits the pillow, all there, and you get a second where you're not occupied by doing anything, they're gonna start coming up. So I would just recommend that you start writing a journal. If you don't like the concept of a journal, just keep a notebook of different, and you could even make a bulleted list of the different things that you feel during the day, or the different things that are bothering you, or the anxious thoughts that you did have. Just give it somewhere to go so that it doesn't have to come up from an emotional place and just really disturb you and make you anxious and make it harder to go to sleep. And I just find that if I give maybe as part of that transition period, if you just give yourself 30 minutes to write down everything that's bothering you, and it doesn't have to be in perfect prose at all. In fact, it's probably easier just to jot it down, but there's something about, and I talk about writing so much because it really is so helpful. There's something about letting you have this thought that's been buzzing in your head, maybe it's some idea you have, or maybe it's some question, and by getting it out on paper, it's not that it like neutralizes the thought necessarily, it's just that it's like, I don't have to keep it in my head now because it's on paper and I can go back to it whenever I feel like it. If I don't have to ruminate on it so much. Like, I think that maybe it's like a memory thing. Like, if I'm worried I'm not going to remember something, like if I have an idea that I really want to investigate further, and I don't write it down, I feel like I'll tend to think about it more and ruminate on it more because I'm worried deep down that I'm going to lose the thought if I don't keep it fresh in the head. So writing it down kind of is like, okay, it's there. I'm not going to lose it. It's, it's in the flesh now. It's physical. So yeah, give your anxious thoughts a chance to come out and put them on paper. And I think that will be significantly helpful. Okay. I think I'm almost to the end here. All right. If you're really having trouble, this is moving into that category of preventing anxiety loops from forming. If you're really having trouble not going to an anxious place when you sleep, and this was totally me, I could not lay down to sleep without getting really anxious and getting really worked up, and it was just where my mind immediately went because of where I was in my healing process. If that's you, and you're just kind of at a place where you don't know what else to do, one thing that I recommend is watching really benign, boring documentaries while you try to fall asleep. Oh, that just made me remember one more thing that I skipped. So I'm not talking about Netflix documentaries. Those are too well done. They're too well written, too well produced, too interesting. What you want is like early 2000s History Channel documentaries that are like about kind of like some boring ancient civilization, or like some kind of process or activity of ants or some other weird bug that you don't really care about. I mean, it's interesting, but like you kind of couldn't care less. The whole point is give yourself something that is positive. So no violent, no scary, no like, don't watch like documentaries about aliens or something like that. Something really light and positive, that is interesting and that holds your attention, but honestly you couldn't care less about if you heard the next word or not. That's what you want, because if you can get on this thing where your mind is going and it's focused on one thing, but it's really not like invested in that thing, then eventually it's just going to drop off into sleep. Okay, like if you're watching a really intriguing Netflix documentary, your mind's going to be focused on one thing, but it's going to be like committed and intrigued by that thing to such a degree that you're not going to let yourself go to sleep. Or if you do, it's going to be much later. I can remember watching weird documentaries about like bridges being built, or like American history stuff, or ancient Rome, which, I mean, I'm interested in ancient Rome, but, you know, there's only so much time you can listen to some random old guy talking about aqueducts before you're not going to nod off, even if you're, I don't know, even if you really like that stuff like I do. But also, like, caterpillars and butterflies and bird migratory patterns. I mean, you know, you get the idea. So find yourself a good, positive, benign documentary that's not going to wig you out or anything. And you might want to view it beforehand so that you know what you're getting into. Like, if you're watching that documentary about them building the ships, or if you're watching a documentary about, like, I don't know, wildlife in the western United States, and then all of a sudden you get some, like, it transitions into something about those, like, alien sightings or something. You don't want any of that. I don't know why I keep mentioning aliens in this video, but I'm just, like, talking about things that kind of borderline could trigger, like, psychedelic anxiety. I'm sorry, I gotta, go away. Sorry, I got a text and it wouldn't go off the screen. Yeah, so that, once you find the right documentary, I find that really helpful, because you just need that thing to keep your mind off of it. Okay. So another thing that really affected me, like I said, I'm really light sensitive, so this may not be for everybody, but when it was dark in the room, that scared me more, or caused more anxiety than if there was a little bit of soft light. So one thing that I got in a habit of doing is leaving a very soft light on until and relaxing to that light until I was basically at the brink of sleep, or I noticed myself almost falling asleep. And then I would be like, okay, I'm pretty much there. I turn the light off real quick and I just go back to what I was doing. I found that provoked so much less anxiety than if I turned the light out immediately and tried to go to sleep in the dark. Again, everyone's different. You may not be light sensitive, but if you are, that's a good way. And I should have gotten this beforehand, but hold on. I have this light, which it's pretty cool, but you can't really get the full effect because it's really light in here right now. But this is a moonlight, and it's actually, you can kind of see it's actually 3D printed, and it has this little remote, and so like it's on its most powerful setting and you can hardly see it. I'm going to turn my light off for a second. Well, you can still not even barely see it. Okay. Sorry for that little. But anyway, this is just really bright, and it has this little remote. So it actually, you can turn it on a 2-hour timer. And that's something that sometimes I would do, where I would just turn it on, and I actually keep it in the floor by my bed so I can't see it directly. And then just turn the 2-hour timer on so I don't have to worry about turning it off. I can just kind of drift off to sleep. So you might want to get a moonlight or something like that. I got mine on Amazon. It was pretty cheap. But get one with a timer if you do, because it's really nice to not have to worry about turning it off. Okay. And then the final and I would say most important point that I'll make, sorry, I just didn't get this quite right, is if you're laying in bed and you start to have an anxiety thing come on, you know you're starting to get into an anxiety loop, you know you're starting to have a panic attack or an anxiety attack, get up. Just get up, go do something else, and then get yourself more tired. Do all the things that I talked about in my video about stopping a panic attack. Just don't let the anxiety build momentum for even a second. And just get up. It's like you might want to stay in bed because you're worried that if you get up, you're going to cause yourself to lose a bunch of sleep. But really doing it this way is going to cause you to lose less sleep in the long run than if you sit in bed and go through the anxiety process. You might, if it's 11 o'clock at night and you feel anxiety coming on and you get up and you do stuff for 20 minutes and then finally go back to bed and then you fall asleep at 11:45, okay, you lost 45 minutes of sleep. But if you get into a whole anxiety thing, I mean, it could be 1 or 2 o'clock before you get yourself calmed down enough to fall asleep. Trust me, I'm speaking from experience. I know. And you probably do too by this time. The only problem with this is if you live with someone or like you share a bed with someone, it can be very frustrating for them. Also speaking from experience, at the time I was living with someone, and it was very, very frustrating for him when I would just constantly get up and then come back to bed, and then because it affected his sleep too, and it's a mess. So that might be your life right now, and there's not really anything I can say besides it is what it is, and you just got to get through it. I mean, it may be the kind of thing where you need to sleep on the couch or sleep in the guest bedroom if you have one on those kinds of nights, or just it's really not the end of the world. And you should probably have a conversation with your partner about what you're going through and why getting up is important, to make sure that they understand, so they're not just getting needlessly frustrated with you. But even once they understand, it is frustrating, and you want to, I mean, they'll get over it, but in order to, it might just be better to go ahead and take the plunge and sleep in a different bedroom or sleep on the couch, because if you're trying to get through anxiety, the last thing you want is your partner's frustration with you also on your back at the same time. Just neutralize that whole situation and sleep in a different room. I mean, or sleep, yeah. I don't know. Going through this experience when you have a live-in partner is tough, but hopefully it will bring you closer together. So yeah, those are the tips that I have. Those are all things that worked for me, that I really lived by, because I had such a hard time with this. So just to reiterate, the 3 basic ideas are: make sure you're ready to go to sleep before you go to sleep. Make sure you're actually tired and sleepy. Preemptively neutralize any anxiety and anxious thoughts that might come up, and then prevent anxiety loops from forming and gaining momentum. Prevent them from gaining momentum is the most important thing you can do. So yeah, I hope this helped you. Yeah.